Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Future Proof, the podcast where we're decoding how leaders, founders, and execs are reshaping the landscape with AI, data, and automation. And if you are looking to future-proof your business, you're definitely in the right place. And so welcome today, Mark Rickmeier from TXI Digital. Mark, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me today.
Let's jump into today's episode with Mark. Mark, real quick, the way we usually start off is just tell us a little bit about your background, about you, so people get to know who you are.
Sure. So let's see. I am the CEO of TXI. I have like 5 jobs. I feel like we can just kind of get into it. But so my primary one, I'm the CEO of TXI. TXI stands for Technology, User Experience, and Innovation. Those are the 3 things we really care about when we're building digital products for our clients. When I'm not doing that, I do a lot of writing on the side. So I am the Business Innovation Chair for Forbes and the Culture Chair for Fast Company. So I do a lot of writing and industry work there. In a fun, kind of unique way of my own take on the software industry, I'm the founder of a collective of companies. I try to bring together my 30 or so best competitors around the world, people who do a lot of what I do. And we try to not have this gloves up animosity relationship, but really lean into the idea of what I call cooperation, or how one can cooperate with competitors and learn from each other. And so I started this
I love that
movement about, 12 years ago now, where I bring everyone together. We just did a whole retreat in Asheville, in North Carolina, and brought everyone together to talk shop about changes in the industry and how things are affected. So I've been running that for a while, trying to build trust between competitors. And then last but not least, in 2017, when I became CEO, I wanted to start learning from people outside of my immediate competitive sphere, so other kinds of leaders I could learn from, and take at least a week, even if it's just 1 week a year, where I'm not dad at home and I'm not CEO at work, but I'm able to think about my own career progression and do it with other really smart folks. And so I would find this week to be out, as crazy as it sounds, but as far from technology as is possible. So out in nature, doing a long hike. We spent the first year 5 days hiking through Scotland, and called it a walk shop rather than a workshop, because we were walking the entire time. So in that case, I had 10 executives, 5 men, 5 women, go to the Highlands of Scotland to talk about professional development and what is the life of a CEO. And every year I try to bring people from around the world for that kind of professional.
And do you write up your, like, kind of that, what, like a debrief at the end of that, like a summary of what you did?
Well, it's so funny because that's how it started, actually. After that first experience, we all were talking about this unique, this unique experience to get that much dedicated time with dedicated leaders. And I was writing about it. We were all writing about it on LinkedIn, and people were like, "Oh my, that sounds amazing! Like, when's the next one?" And I told them, like, "Well, there's no next one. I was just doing this to get advice on my company, but I guess, yeah, sure, we could do another one." And so I organized a trip to the Black Forest of Germany. Then we had 18 leaders from around the world want to go on that one. And so it's just been building ever since. So I'm the genius that started a travel company in 2020. You can imagine how well that went. But after the
perfect timing, right?
Yeah, just nailed it. So after that happened. But yeah, so this year I'm taking 14 executives through the Shikoku pilgrimage in Japan. And so doing a big kind of temple pilgrimage there. The full pilgrimage would take you 6 months. We're not going to get through all 88 temples, but we'll hit like 11 of them at least. And this is a nice opportunity, as I said, to be able to reflect on your career and where it's going. And when there is so much change and we're all thinking about how the hell do we future-proof our businesses or our own careers, it's nice to get that outside perspective and time to really consider. So it is a small thing I do to try to keep myself in check and think about where I'm going.
So real quick on that, is that something that people can read about, or?
Oh yeah. So there's a website for it, walkshop.io, and you can see the trips we have planned and where we're going. And
we'll put the links below when this podcast goes live. But that's, Mark, I think that is phenomenal. The way I think of that is, that's a mastermind, as they call it in the digital world, but with actual travel experience built in. It's way better, right?
It's
really
nice,
cool.
I mean, when you meet someone, especially if you meet someone over Zoom or very transactional, you got a half hour till your next meeting. It's very different than you're spending 3 or 4 days out in the woods sweating together. And by the third day, you're like, no, seriously, why are you here? Like, what is it you're trying to unpack? And so I've seen business leaders go into business together. People have gone through like M&A together. Others have built lifelong friendships that you know who to call when you're going through a thing.
Yeah.
And I get phenomenal perspective on my own trajectory and career. So it's something that Walkshop is something I'm very proud of, but something I try to maintain at least once a year. That opportunity to get offline with our really, really smart folks. So this year I've got 14 folks between the UK, Canada, Argentina, and the US all flying to Japan to go through this week-long
That's
discovery.
amazing. And how long is this one?
They're always 5 days. We found that especially these hard charging type A CEO types that think they
Yeah.
can do it.
Yeah.
The first year, 3 people made it. 7 had to break down and hitchhike at one point. And we're not even hiking with a pack, right? Like I have a
Right.
service that carries our bags for us. So you're really just going with
You're
the
just
weight of the
walking,
world on
right?
your shoulders. We're just walking. But
Yeah.
since so many of us just sit and type all day, the act of actually walking 30,000 steps is harder than most people realize. So we've now structured it where you do 2 days of walking. We do a day off of discussion where we're going through the details of, generally there's a book that's guiding the overall theme of the experience, and
Got
then
it.
2 more days of hiking. So 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on. And this year we're unpacking a book called Ikigai. It's a Japanese philosophy of how you find singular purpose and passion in your life. And so going through that to help leaders think about where they should be optimizing and spending most of their time. Last year, we went through a book called The Strengths Finder. It's the Gallup's assessment, if you've ever done that.
Yeah.
And I took a group of people through the Alps for maybe one of the hardest hikes we've ever done while talking about our individual strengths.
Really, really cool. I love that. I'm glad that you really revealed that, because that's something that I myself and I know several other people that would probably want to look at that in the future for sure. So thanks, Mark, for sharing that.
It's very
Yeah.
relevant to the top. I mean, I know it sounds like a very analog, let's go walk in the woods together, maybe a bit hippy dippy, but I think for those of us who are really thinking about where our business is going, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of change happening in the industry, and it is valuable to
In
take.
every industry.
Oh yeah, in every industry, there's so much changing, and I think this is where Warren Buffett had that great interview around busy is the new stupid. That if you're constantly juggling between meetings and emails and
You get nothing
sending
done.
invoices, you never get time to consider where is my business going and what changes do I need to make as a leader to help shepherd that. And so I really value the time I get with other folks who are really dedicated in their own businesses, leaders in their own right, to hash out some of the things I'm debating and do it in a way where I'm not rushed to the next immediate meeting. I get multiple days to beat these ideas up together. I just personally find I get new ideas when I'm out walking than if I'm just sedentary and sitting all day.
Yeah.
It's a gift I give myself at least once a year. And then the rest of my life is, on Zoom in meetings with the keyboard. Like I know I have a very digital enhanced life, but it's nice to occasionally have a very analog way of looking at the world.
You got to disrupt it. I totally agree with everything you just said, because if you think about it, if you're lucky enough to do something like that, but even if you just get away for a week on vacation, which luckily for me, that just happened last week, and the clarity sometimes you get, my kids are grown now, right? So they're adults. So it's easy. It's a lot easier where I'm not chasing them around the whole time, and there's actually time to think, and you come back with so much more clarity. I can't imagine what your walking and hiking getaways do for that clarity, especially collaborating with other leaders and figuring out where the big challenges are and how to navigate.
Yeah, it's really, so I try to do that within the Forbes and Fast Company community. I try to do that in the community of competitors I bring together. I do it with these other leaders that help me unpack things while I'm out hiking. And then obviously I have a phenomenal leadership team I get to talk about the state of the industry with and make our own pivots at TXI. But
really cool.
There's
so yeah,
enough.
tell us, let's get into TXI. Tell us a little bit about TXI, and because you guys are working in some really cool emerging tech across a number of very interesting industries. And I think we're going to focus on some of the supply chain and logistics and kind of old school, but it applies to every industry. So yeah, jump in and talk about that.
I mean, so we work across a number of industries. I like those ones we were just mentioning because I feel like they sometimes are technology laggards, but we have a lot of work we do in the pharma space, working and building one of the largest knowledge graphs actually in existence and being able to provide unique insights from that. We have a lot of work in the digital health space, but I think it's those in manufacturing, logistics, supply chain. Like those are some of the companies that have not really gotten the benefit from leveraging their data or thinking about intelligent product design that I think could have bigger strides. So I get really excited about the impacts we can have in those kind of blue collar companies where there's a tremendous amount of value we can bring quickly. A nice low bar to get over sometimes. The work that TXI does, I think, is a unique moment in where the industry is pivoting. So historically, we were always described as this product innovation company. So how do we bring ideas to our partners and thinking about what can and should they be doing? And then we're not the kind of company that just leaves them with a fancy PowerPoint deck. We actually have engineering teams that can take that work and execute it. Half the team is thinking about how do we build the thing right and have a
Yeah.
strong technical platform. I think the change that the industry is making is that for the last 20 so odd years, we've been in this super cycle, as Gartner would refer to it as, in the digital transformation space or building digital products. And
Yeah.
while that's certainly been the case, the industry is changing to move away from, or maybe evolve beyond, I should say, digital products towards intelligent products. And so rather than building something where you have, let's say, a good dashboard or report for a user to understand what's happening, how can you now start leveraging the data and you leveraging AI and machine learning to be able to take autonomous action on behalf of that user? And so not only do we understand what's happening, why is it happening, and what you can do as
Right.
a result of it. So this is where we start talking about the value of a company's data, and that the data is probably, if not more valuable than the system that created it, and really leaning into intelligent products beyond the kind of base foundation of where the industry's been for the last 20 years in the digital product space.
Very, very interesting. And so data becomes a massively important asset to companies as they go forward because of, like you were talking about, the insights gained from it and the ability to take the next best action from that data set. Am I thinking about that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is something, understanding the nature of the data that you have and how you might structure and then learn from that data is critically important going forward. One of the things we see a lot of, especially in more, I think, where you have legacy systems or these industrial companies, is what I joke about is swivel chair integration. So you have one
Yep.
system that you're typing in, and then a person swivels their chair and types the same information into a different system because there's no
I've heard
system.
this term multiple times now, the swivel chair.
Not a
Yes.
lot of, so when they don't have a cohesive view of their shop floor, there's no data that you're actually able to start building a model on top of, or in some cases the data is not even digitized at all on a user's email or in a spreadsheet, or like in one case it was literally in a company's whiteboard that they maintain a lot of their operational data. It just, you can't start getting the leverage and the benefit of AI until we start having a more cohesive view of the data itself. And so a big part of what we're talking about with our companies is how do we actually get value from the data that you have and start leveraging that more. Data is the base foundation for a lot of the insights you would need in intelligent product design.
Very, very interesting. And for everybody, listening and watching, what Mark just said is so important. What Mark just said is critically important because it's not just adding features, all right? It's not just bolting on the AI. It's how do you do what Mark just said, which is to take your data and change the way in which you can think about your company's product or service in a different way because you've never had the unlock of what some of that data is telling you until now. And so I think that's where some of this innovation and Mark, kind of what you're saying is can really change the company's, direction in some cases.
And I think so there's a model, I mean, like most good things in consulting, there's a model for how clients and how people can be thinking about this in their business. And you start off with this foundational focus on just getting your data structured in a way that you can start having it in a single location. So we talk about how can I build, if you're really just thinking about a data product to the base level, how do I try to get all my information captured in a way that I have access to it? How do I democratize access to that information? And how can I start getting maybe customized notifications and alerts based on how I'm performing based on the data that I have? The next level up from that would be moving from a data type product to information. So how do I start getting insights from that data? That might be using data-driven recommendations or something that's providing unique insights based on the data that says, like, this is what's happening, to start getting more information provided to the user, which is different. I think there are some people that will say, I'm data rich and information or knowledge poor. And so this is where we start getting beyond the ability to aggregate information together. How do we start deriving insights from that? And so knowledge is the next level up, where we start being able to make answers of not just what happened, but why did it happen? And I think that allows you to start making some predictions. So this is where you start seeing, especially in an industrial setting, things like preventative maintenance. We can predict faults before they happen, which means we can reduce downtime and have replacement parts at the right time at the right place. And ultimately where we get to on the the highest level of that pyramid is wisdom. So beyond the knowledge of what's happening and why, how can we start bringing AI driven insights to an organization that we have more strategic decision making happening based on all the patterns we're able to learn from, to provide unique wisdom around how they structure their teams, maybe how they organize pricing, how they display materials and send materials around to different places at the right time. You start seeing more system autonomy where the system can start taking action based on the data it has. And so you're not just bringing insights, but you're taking through generally agentic solutions, some kind
Right.
of automated step towards sort of progress. So I think there's a whole, and we can share the link in the notes, but there's this whole data pyramid where it starts as data as the foundational element, but you work your way up through information, knowledge, and wisdom-based applications to get to what we call this like intelligent product design, where AI is being leveraged to really bring unique ways of engaging with the user going forward.
Amazing. Amazing. And are you helping your clients think through this kind of progression? It's almost like, I know we have the pyramid, but from a consulting standpoint that there's always a phased approach, right? That you would go through that to get there, right? And a timeline. And so just to give everybody just back of the envelope, Mark, what does that typically take a company, right? And let's just stick with the industries we're in, manufacturing, industrial supply. I think it applies to almost anything, but is that a 6-month thing? Is it a 18-month thing for leaders that are saying, hey, that sounds really interesting?
So the first thing I've always found is that you need to be able to traffic in the brand of the actual, for the company. So let's take an example. We were working with a rail car company and they maintain their own fleet of cars. So if you're making a multi-billion-dollar investment in a rail fleet, if you can extend the life of that rail car by taking care of it really well, that can add 20 or 30 years of service. And so they're clearly incentivized to take care of these cars. And a service event is where a rail car is being fixed or maintained. Is a minute, every minute the car is being maintained in the yard is a minute it's not actually making revenue hauling goods around the country. And so they look at a way to optimize that service event. So these are companies that are thinking about things like service maintenance. They have projected outbound dates or PODs or cycle time, the difference between inbound and outbound when you're making that repair. That's the thing they care about. AI is kind of like not on their forefront of their mind. And so best thing we can do is we talk about how do we leverage data and AI is understand how these businesses make money and how they operate. And so the way to think about how do we bring value is not to talk about AI at all. Let's talk about railcar maintenance. And we're like, let's go spend some time walking around the rail yard. And so in this case, we spent 2 days walking around a rail yard with a data scientist and a strategist and an engineer and a designer saying, if we were to take another way of looking at this, how might we try to reduce that service event? A simple act of going from 65 days to 55 days to repair a rail car is millions of dollars a year. And so you can start making investments that have a longer term impact if you can understand the value behind it. And I think this is my biggest frustration in the industry currently, is there's such a large hype cycle around AI. You hear things like where the board's saying, we have to do something with AI. And so now they're like, a hammer looking for a nail. And the better answer is to say, what's the business problem we want to solve? Great. Cycle time. How do we reduce cycle time and get our cars out in service faster? Now we can take a look at that and say, how might we be able to leverage our data and therefore also AI to grow on top of that data to change?
Where does AI fit in there?
Yeah, exactly right. And so I think the way that we think about this with our business leaders is really trying to understand what their business is challenged by, where we think there may be unique opportunities to leverage data differently, and then coming in with a solution that, but you're talking about, in this case, rail cars and cycle time and maintenance. You're not talking about how
speaking
AI,
their language at the board level or the C-suite level, right? Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's and if you are able to come back and say, here's how we're going to operate over the next several years, it is easier for you to put together a multi-year strategy around this if you can start talking about the value that you're creating and the ROI along the way. But you have to be able to talk to it in business terms and understand the value they're creating. Because I think, honestly, some of the biggest challenges to AI adoption, or as we get into other kinds of technologies around like augmented reality, it's gaps of knowledge in the existing C-suite, particularly in industrial companies where they've maybe been doing this for 30 or 50 years, and the industry on the technology side is changing far more rapidly than I think business operations is changing in industrial companies. So you really need to think about how will their business run and how can you actually talk about new ways of servicing, in this case, servicing a rail car, but you're talking about the business justification for it. You're not talking about AI as the primary driver. It's the means to an end.
Yeah. AI is just a mechanism downstream, but you're talking about how do you improve, and so we call those use cases. And it's funny. I was working with an AI type consulting company that's exactly what they said is you have to work top down from the board level or the C-suite level, and you have to identify the highest ROI use cases. Doesn't always mean top line growth. Sometimes it's exactly what you're talking about is how do we minimize something that is a very big pain point right now, like rail car maintenance? And then that's where you build a business case of where AI and data and automation fit in to solve it, right?
Yep.
And so, Mark, that's a phenomenal example.
I think going from there, you can start getting a sense of, where heavy focus on everything you just said is absolutely right. Where is the ROI? What's the value we're able to generate? And oftentimes this is trying to gather data where there isn't data currently. And so in the rail yard, for example, there's a thing called switch planning. So switching is when you actually have to move cars between rail lines. Very time consuming, very expensive, labor intensive. So you want to reduce switching as much as possible to get cars fixed in the right order. And these companies are the best at what they do in the world. But the process literally involves a large whiteboard with magnetic tiles with all the different cars laid out in the yard and humans thinking about how they want to optimize and move things around. And that's the kind of thing that AI can really help with. But in this case,
really help with.
You need to first create a digital twin of the yard to be able to actually do that kind of mapping. And so in some cases, the data you're trying to gather literally doesn't exist in a digitized format. In other cases, we're trying to digitize things like the rail car itself and create a digital twin of the car. But in this case, the AI we're talking about is more like vision AI than large language models. So how can I put a series of cameras at a car and automatically start detecting things like dents, corrosion, damage, graffiti, like those kinds of things to start working up the repair order before the human inspection begins?
Yeah.
We are far away from AI replacing human inspectors, particularly in heavily regulated environments like this, where, like, God forbid, the wrong maintenance is done, and then you have a rail car explosion like you saw in Ohio, the tank leak.
Right.
But you can at least make their lives a lot easier where they're not starting from scratch. And you can say, here's how we can make their work faster. We can provide them more insight. We can say, the last time you did a repair like this, you needed this, this, and this. Does this look right? And so we can start leveraging AI much differently. And I think that's our job as consultants, is to bring those kinds of new ways of working to customers, but always in the context of solving a business problem with a high ROI focus in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mark, you're so spot on. And what we call them, and we're adamant on this podcast about with everybody we talk to, and I always give Alexander DeRitter from Smith OS credit for this, but he labeled them digital coworkers. And so to your point, this is not about replacing humans. This is about how do we make humans' lives a lot easier by taking things that are very repetitive and mundane and sometimes just complicated, right? And using AI as a digital coworker to help them make their life easier and help them make better data-driven decisions, right? Because, again, to your point, like if they're thinking on a whiteboard, there's probably 15 different ways to optimize that, right? The shuffling of the cars, right? No one can process things faster than AI. That's where that's a great use case for that. And there's so many examples of this. And I feel like that our whole goal on this podcast is to get the information out to the leaders in exactly the way you talked about it, is to break it down to simple terms. This is not about the hype. It's about how do we make things more efficient and easier and make good employees 10 times better.
And does that make sense? It does. And I think, so there's a futurist I was talking about that had a unique way of trying to describe this to leaders. So imagine you are like a painter, you've got a big palette, right? And the way that they mix colors is they take the primary colors around the outside, move in the middle, and merge them up together. So you have your red and your blue and your green and your white, and you merge them all together to get new colors. And they was like describing this same concept of what we do, talking about where is this industry going. Our palette has different things around the outside. So one is large language models, one is machine learning, one is advanced robotics, one is augmented reality. And you start thinking about, how do I merge these two things together? And we're at this unique time where we are starting to see more of those, what seems like disparate kinds of emerging technology starting to come together. So if I can take, for example, augmented reality, where I'm able to look through a lens and get information about the thing that I'm looking at, combined with a large language model, I can now, by wearing glasses, look at something and say, what is this and what's wrong with it? And I start getting real-time guided inspection and guided advice around a thing that I'm trying to modify, install, configure, maintain, things like that. This is incredibly game changing. There is such a skilled labor shortage in manufacturing in industrial companies where you have
Yeah.
folks with deep institutional knowledge who are leaving. And it's hard to replace those folks. And so if you can think about ways to improve training, improve retention, but especially guided inspection where you have someone doing a job and they need that expert with them side by side, that's getting increasingly more and more expensive to do. But if you have
Right.
that, just like that assistant, that worker assistant that's there and can guide you based on the knowledge we've been able to build into a model, that's
Yep.
where it gets really powerful. If you can combine that with something like augmented reality to say, what am I looking at right now? And what's wrong with it? And what's the next step I need to take? You start seeing a massive increase in retention of new employees, decrease in work order, like fault tolerance and things like that, a more productive output. We're starting to see the beginnings of those. And so that's where
Right.
I think as we start talking about future proofing organizations and helping people think about this, particularly in these companies where skilled labor and workforce management issues are going to become really critical. I like seeing how AI can be leveraged to help humans be more effective and to help new people
Me
enter the
too.
workforce, like creating jobs and helping
Yeah.
retention go higher. I think AI is always talked about as taking jobs away. And like in this case, it's an opportunity for people to break into manufacturing.
Right.
There's some incredibly high turnover rates there, and this is a way to help improve that.
Yeah. And we're trending towards a really skilled labor shortage across the board, right? Manufacturing, you're seeing it already, but there are a bunch of industries. And as the baby boomer generation continues to hit retirement, that knowledge is going away. To me, AI is one of the saviors, if we can, of getting that knowledge out of them, to your point, to create better training for the next generation of workers, because we're just not going to have enough of those skilled workers in the middle generations that are coming up to absorb that knowledge fast enough.
I
And
mean,
I
in
really think
manufacturing,
that that's an opportunity.
it's a huge, I mean, they were saying about 72% of work still in manufacturing is done with some kind of manual intervention. And they're projecting between 20 and 30 million unmet jobs because you have the people who have been doing this for a long time leaving the workforce. And the new people that are joining don't want to be handed a binder saying, here's how you do this. They learn digitally, they learn very differently. And so you
Right.
have really long hiring cycles, you have really low retention cycles where people leave within the first 3 months. A staggering number of people leave within the first 3 months in these manufacturing type companies, and it's leading business owners scrambling of how do they solve for this skilled labor shortage. So I think this is where things like remote guided assistance not only help to shorten the learning cycle there and help people
Right.
to get started in a new role, but you start improving quality standards. The nice thing, and this is what I love about this, is that there are companies who have been doing this for a while. So Boeing, Siemens, Rolls-Royce, a lot of companies have been thinking about how they can roll it.
Other companies can model that right after, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think it's no longer a proof of concept. Like we're kind of well beyond that at this phase.
Yeah.
This is not a question of can the technology do this kind of thing. We're now really more in a proof of value. Be like, how do I actually shorten that training cycle? How do I improve my retention? How do I improve remote guided inspection, remote faults, things like that? I think if you can phrase it more as a proof of value to demonstrate the ROI you're able to create, that's how you get past the C-suite faster. I don't think proof of concept, I think, is a scary term because it sounds like it's all R&D. It sounds like it's all
Right.
hypothetical.
Right. And people are afraid to invest because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
feel
yeah.
like they're not right.
So I think for the proof of value is probably a better framing for that, given that there are companies who have been investing in this already and starting to see real turnaround. For them, it's more about how does this scale, not like does it work. I think we're
Right.
past the proof of concept stage at this rate.
Yeah. No, that's that's phenomenal. I wasn't even thinking about that, but that's a great another great use case that you brought up, because I think it's a trend that's, to me, that's a scarier trend in the short term than anything we can worry about with AI right now. Is we are losing critical knowledge, right, from people leaving industries and retiring industry, and we're not passing that knowledge off in a very good or healthy way. And that's a great example of how we could. Mark, before I get into my last question, which I'll ask about the personal thing, but I would really like you to give your advice, because you have such a great, I always say, from the consulting standpoint, and especially some of the things you do with Forbes and Fast Company, but that perspective that you have across industries, could you give some advice to folks watching here that are thinking, all right, how do I go about, I don't want to say growing my company, but factoring in emerging tech, and how do I tackle it? What would your advice be for them?
So I've been doing a lot of research on this because I think it's easy for me to talk about companies like, a Boeing or a Rolls Royce where they have the resources and maybe investing in emerging technology for years. And if you're a smaller or mid-sized industrial manufacturing company, you probably don't have those resources and now feel the chances of disruption are even higher.
Yes.
And so we've been doing a lot of research with these, I would say, not early adopters, people who have been wondering about when does this feel real? When can I start seeing value? So I'm happy to post the findings of all that research because we literally just published it about a week
Awesome.
ago. But I think part of the value there is getting some insights from how other emerging technologies are shaping industry. A great time to be, I don't know, stepping out of your own bubble a little bit and seeing how other people are solving things. So I've been seeing a lot of really good communities examples. And so I think I mean, probably can tell by now, I'm a big fan of community and I like getting out.
I love community. And I think it's more important, Mark, than ever because of how the rate of change that is happening. And I think you're spot on for it.
So I think that's one aspect of that is being able to tap into the existing communities that are helping people thinking about where smart manufacturing and industrial change is going. And the second, I thought there was a lot of value in this case. That ride along that we did where we were there for 2 days was not even something, we charged for. We just said, we'll bring you a bunch of ideas and maybe we bring you 10 ideas and you already have 7 of them, but there might be 2 or 3 things you're not really already thinking about. And I think that outside perspective can be really valuable when you look at your shop floor, your operation, or especially if you're like, I'm data rich and knowledge poor, like how do I solve this problem? How do I leverage all this data that I have?
And that one I hear from tons of companies, right?
Yeah.
I have data, but it's disparate and I can't make sense of it. And
there's no strategy.
I can't get to it.
Yeah. So I think that's where I think an outside perspective can be valuable to say, well, here's how others are solving that kind of a challenge, particularly if it's coupled with, and the person who most knows the system is leaving in a year or two. Like you have that fear of skilled labor shortage is particularly acute in the companies in the industrial space and the manufacturing space. That is maybe less so of a problem that we experience in places like pharma companies and healthcare companies, but it is becoming an increasingly acute problem in manufacturing and industrial companies. So those would be the steps I would say. Happy to post the research we've been doing in this to get how do non-early adopters start thinking about these kinds of things. But I would say outside perspective, thinking about doing things incrementally, trying to get a handle on the data that you have and how it could be better leveraged, and then leaning in community to get a sense from other companies, all of which are easy steps to start taking.
100%. Love that. All right. Last questions. Honestly, I could talk to you for hours. And I'm definitely going to have you back to share some more insights. Mark, if you could fix one thing in your own business for, let's call it TXI, with AI, what would that be?
Personal thing for me, and then I think a goal I have for the company. So we'll start with the company one because it's less personal. I think, as we've been talking about, the way to describe a way to help is to really talk in the vocabulary of your clients. So in this case, we're going to talk about rail cars. We're not going to talk about software. We're not going to talk about agile. We're not going to talk about AI and machine learning. We're going to talk about rail car maintenance and how do we shorten the cycle time. It is really important in this day and age to be able to understand the needs of our business partners and what challenges that they have. And so a big thing that I've been telling my own team about is how do you get as knowledgeable as quickly as you can about an industry and about the pains you're going through? And no one should be talking about, as weird as it sounds, no one should be talking about TXI, right? No one cares about our people and our process. And they want to know about how they can solve their own business challenges.
It's always about that. You're exactly right.
And so I think there is an opportunity here to leverage AI to be able to help with that kind of research. Help me understand what this business is going through. Help me understand the changes in their industry. Help me summarize information that might be publicly available about them, especially if they're a large publicly traded company, some of the things that they're reporting their unique challenges on. And this is where AI can help you get smarter faster by talking about what's happening in their business. And so I really leveraged AI to help me do initial research. It's been really valuable.
The deep research one?
It's
really good.
You can build prompts that help you really, that are very knowledgeable about your own company, the things that you do well, your own case studies that can help you figure out how much of any of that might be applicable to a company. So I find I get good insights from that. And I think taking and kind of an agent-based approach, the advice I was given earlier this year was every member of your sales and marketing team, that person should be backed up by 2 or 3 agents to help them get smarter faster.
100%.
So I think that's the thing where we can understand more of the nature of the challenges our prospects are facing. That is far more valuable to them than them hearing about our case studies or them hearing about our unique process. Like no one cares about that stuff. It's valuable to have. You need to have those things, but that's not how you build trust early on.
Right.
The personal thing for me is I think I'm uniquely bad at always keeping my CRM up to date. And we know systems are only as good as the data that they have. And so one of the things I'm going to be looking at is how I can build my own agentic solution that I can hand off a lot of the CRM updates and maintenance to something that's less time consuming for me personally.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Like, take things off of my plate. All the updates and cataloging of things is something I'm uniquely bad at.
Totally get it. It's fantastic. Mark, you really been just a great guest. I love all the insights you've like I said, definitely want to have you back. But for everybody, before this thing goes live, and we'll have all the links below, but tell them how to get in touch with you guys at TXI.
So TXIdigital.com, you can find information about there. We're regularly publishing, like I said, the research we've been doing on the space. Happy to send those out. I can send out the details for that research. You can download the white paper and get some insights around that.
And I'll put that in one of my next updates. Absolutely.
Perfect. And then for those who are ever curious about going for a hike or want to go engage with our leaders who are out in the woods and not behind Zoom, you can go to walkshop.io and talk to me about joining one of our future hikes as well.
I love that. That's definitely on my future plans. I love that you do that. Mark, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for sharing your insights. It's just been really fun. And I will say this for everybody that is thinking about future-proof your business, really take in what Mark had said and some of the use cases. Think about it from the business perspective always first. And if we don't say that enough, we're going to start hammering that, because this is not about, we've always said on the podcast, this is not about AI hype. This is about how best leaders and execs can start to think about how to use emerging tech to, pivot and put the moat around their business or drive it in a different direction. And what, some of the insights that we just talked about today, it's always about, your high ROI use cases. So that wraps up today's episode of Future Proofed, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.